Hello, this is Phil. Welcome back to underKG show. Today we got Xperia Z2 Ultra. We can get from the name Ultra that it's got a magnificent screen. It's got a 6-inch of a display, which is a bit smaller than the 6.4-inch of an Xperia Z Ultra of last year. But still, this is a gigantic phone. At first, there were too many phones that were way too big, so I thought this wasn't exactly too big, but it actually is once I started using it and figuring out that my thumb actually can't get even half of the screen. But before we get to that, let's get started with the basic specs of the phone. It's got a receiver on the top, Sony logo, front-facing camera, 6-inch of a 720p display. That's kind of low, but we'll get into that in a second. There's no key on the bottom. They're built in as a soft key. On the right is a power key with the volume rocker. There's a dedicated camera shutter key and a micro SIM card slot right there. It's got a tray and the 3.5mm headphone jack right there. It seems like Sony favors to put the headphone jack on the right side of their phones instead of the top or bottom on the bigger scale phone like the Z Ultra or the T2 Ultra. I don't know why, and it's not exactly handy, but that's the way they do it. There's nothing on the top. On the left is a micro USB port followed by the micro SD card slot, so you can expand the storage, which is not exactly sufficient as it is built in. And nothing on the bottom. On the back is a 13 megapixel camera, LED flash. They finally built in the LED flash that the Z Ultra was missing and a lot of people have been craving for. The NFC goes there, Sony logo, Xperia logo, and the speaker grill. That's pretty much it. The thing about the T2 Ultra is that it's not exactly the most expensive phone in the world, and what they did is they didn't include the waterproof and the dustproof functionality, and they made the back panel and the overall design and the material of the phone a lot cheaper than its mainstream flagships, which is acceptable considering that it's a mid-ranger instead of the flagship, and it's that much cheaper. But instead of what Samsung and LG does, it's a lot more obvious that this is a mid-ranger instead of a flagship when LG or Samsung or the other manufacturers don't make it look that obvious. That's kind of a thing that I wasn't exactly favoring about. All right, let's get into the software. You can unlock the screen by swiping up or down, and we have the same Sony launcher that we had in the previous Xperias as well. The screen density is a bit low, but everything looks just fine on the display. And it's got an Android 4.3, which isn't exactly pleasure. When there's a KitKat, getting equipped with the Android 4.3 isn't exactly a nice thing. I don't know why they did it, but they did. That's why it's got a toggle bar right there that the Sony has had since the Android 4.1 to 4.3. There's one interesting thing about the software is that one-handed operations. We've seen a lot of one-handed operation tools in the other bigger phones. The Galaxy Note 3 and the G Pro 2 had this function that squeezes the whole screen into certain size so your thumb can actually manage to access the screen. But what they did is one very simple thing. You can double tap on the home button, and the notification bar is gonna get shorter so you can get easier access to the icons on the notification bar, which doesn't exactly seem sufficient. It's not only the notification bar that you have to access when you're using your phone with one hand, but that's the only thing that Sony has included. So that's a little bummer. Let's get to Nova Launcher, which is my favorite. Overall, it's got a Snapdragon 400 processor built inside, which should be enough for the 720p display. And it's got a 1 GB of RAM, which is still enough. And it's a bit short of storage, but you can expand that through the micro SD card slot. Those who actually care about the benchmark scores, it ranks about 19,000 in the Antutu benchmark. That's a little bit below 20,000. And on the bar chart, we can compare that a little bit faster than the Galaxy S3 and a bit slightly lower than the Galaxy Note 2. That's where it stands. And the overall performance is actually quite impressive. It runs without any lag, and it doesn't get slow in most of the functionalities. But what does annoy me is a 720p display. I know because of the cost reduction, they had to adapt a 720p display, but when you're browsing in the full PC website, the letters just don't seem as clear as a 1080p display. I know that's a price thing, but it still is a bit of a bummer. Considering that the 5-inchers don't exactly have matters with the 720p or 1080p, you can barely notice it, but 6-inchers actually do show the differences. Other than that, the overall software is very clean and fast and neat. But what does annoy me, another thing, is that one of the Sony's distinct function is that its equalizers work on the system-wide. Whichever of the system where there's a sound, there's a Sony equalizer applied on it since the Xperia Z1. But they didn't include that on the T2 Ultra. What they did is they took all the function out of the settings menu and they only made it work on the Sony proprietary apps such as Walkman or the Movie app that comes with the phone. So if you're using the other apps, you can't have that Sony original sound enhancement system. That's one thing. Other than that, the sound coming out of the 3.5mm headphone jack or the speaker is actually pretty good. The sound of the headphones is pretty good, and the speaker grill, the back speaker may not be as loud as you want it to be, but the sound quality itself is pretty good. And one thing that is really nice is its battery life. The battery on the T2 Ultra, which is 3000 milliamps built in, lasts longer than a day. I usually tether my LTE network around as a Wi-Fi, and most of the phones don't exactly exceed more than the 5 or 6 hours. But the T2 Ultra did 12 hours of the LTE tether, and it still maintained to leave 26% battery power on the board. That was very impressive. Most of the people would last enough of a day with the T2 Ultra. And the camera quality isn't exactly superior over any other phones, but considering that the Xperia Z Ultra had a terrible camera and the photo quality, which even lagged the LED flash, this is a lot of an improvement over the Z Ultra. Overall, this is a nice phone. This is an amazing phone, but for me, it feels just too big. That's one thing. So if you don't care about being a too big phone, if you're actually getting a T2 Ultra, you might be aiming for a screen that may be too big. So if you're that kind of, this is a nice phone at the price range, at a decent price range. But there's one thing that you shouldn't expect out of T2 Ultra is you shouldn't expect it to feel premium or amazing. It's just a cheap piece of plastic, and it collects fingerprints like crazy, so don't expect any kind of glass premium material on it. Even considering its price range, this is not exactly the best material that you could have used. Other than that, the battery life is amazing, overall processor performances, and the screen is totally great. So if you're not if you don't care about the materials that much, this could be a phone for you. It's not one for me. First off, it's too big. Second off, it doesn't feel premium at all. But if you're fine with that, this is an okay phone at the price range with the gigantic screen. So that was underKG with the Xperia T2 Ultra. Thank you always for watching. Don't forget to tap on there to subscribe to our channel, and we'll come back with more reviews and unboxings of the latest gadgets in the market. Thanks. Bye.